Sorry for that little bit of noise, folks. I'm just putting my microphone on. Uh-oh. Oh, I'm missing something. What am I missing? My little remote controller-y thing. I'll do it on my laptop. How about that? That'll be better. That will be better. T2, T2. And the host is Balthazar. Let's make sure I got my teams open. Teams, teams, teams. Cool, got my lecture all happening over there. Welcome, folks. Thank you so much for joining me here on Thursday, week 10, Comp 1720/6720, the second half of our lecture series or short week series on data art here in 1720. Folks, I'm so pleased to have a number of you joining me live. I can see a small but committed crowd in the on the streams. Of course, happy at any time to have your questions in the chat and to discuss any options that come up for you. I'm just going to make myself small for a minute. We're well into our part of the course where we really deeply focus on the major project as the main outcome that you're going to be doing within Comp 1720/6720. And I can say already that I've been seeing some really interesting stuff because I'm very pleased that I've been seeing, just checking my heads up window in the other screen to see that everything's looking good. It is looking good. I think I need to turn my room light on. I'm missing something here. Well, there we go. That might be a little bit slightly better view. We'll see what it looks like in a minute. I don't have like a direct feed to my outline. Oh, that's a little bit brighter. Yeah, I just wanted the background to be bright as well as the foreground, and that tends to be something that's a little bit easier to see. Let's see if that's improved another notch or so. Oh no, too much. Back down. 3 for that. Too much. Yes, we're well into major project season. And I've been seeing some wonderful sketches, some wonderful storyboards that folks have been posting on the forums. Overall, I'm just super excited about how engaged you folks have been with the pre-lab tasks, preparing your major project, brainstorming ideas, getting together with the others within your lab groups and deciding on where you want to take your major project. And it's just been wonderful to see that happening at this stage. I know that it does seem like the due date is a little while away yet. Maybe you want to do this like a normal assignment where you do it like in quite a compressed amount of time. But I guarantee you that if you stretch things out, you work consistently, you iterate, you play in P5, play and try to find out the most exciting ways you can use this medium, then you will create an artwork which is much better, which really engages with interaction, engages with the theme, and excites people. And I want to be excited when I'm watching your artworks. Remember that I am the main viewer. There are many other viewers. Your tutors will be viewing them, your colleagues will be viewing them, but I need to look around and take a look at everybody's artwork and figure out the level of achievement. So make sure you're exciting me about what I'm seeing. Now I'm just going to do a skip forward. We've got some. I want to find a link, a link to the major project. Haven't found one yet. I'm just going to enter it in. CS courses, Comp 1720, assessments, 05, major project. A few notes for those who are listening, those who are here right now. I guess a little bit of feedback from the tutors is that they're seeing quite a few projects and assignments that involve a lot of work in HTML, CSS, and maybe not so much in P5. And I want to draw your attention to this. In Comp 1720/6720, your major project is an interactive P5 artwork for a new media art exhibition. This is the most important sentence in the spec of your major project. It is the first sentence. If you do a lot of work in HTML, CSS, you are probably creating an artwork, but if you do too much there and not enough in P5, you run the risk of making something which actually isn't an interactive P5 artwork. You really need to use P5 as your main place that you're making your art. I've seen counterexamples of that, but really the goal of this course is to ask you to work within the framework that we provide, within P5. You can, of course, use other libraries and make use of those as part of your work. Maybe do some tweaks to the HTML, use some CSS to enhance something, make it better, but the core of your work should be in P5. So this is a kind of the framework within which we work for this course. Is Connect allowed? No, Connect is not allowed. Sorry. There's been a few questions, or one just popped up in the chat about camera. So I really think that everybody, when you're at this early stage in your work, deciding what to do, make sure that you have read the requirements list for the assessment. Your major project is a P5 sketch. Make sure it has to have P5, and that has to be the main thing. It allows interaction using either or multiple of keyboard, mouse, microphone, camera. Those are the elements that you've got. There's lots of artistic ideas with P5 that would involve other devices, other sensors, different kinds of user inputs, but you can't do any of those, sadly. You can only use keyboard, mouse, microphone, and camera, and it has to be one kind of experience. I just wanted to point out those two things here right now. I know in this list we talk a lot about the computers in the labs. Obviously we're remote, we don't have lab computers to test on, but I ask you just to follow these broad instructions. We are marking on our normal computers. We're not going to set up special hardware for you. And if you are using microphone and camera, please make sure you're not doing something annoying, and make sure that you're doing something which doesn't require me to have the light in a special way or works in multiple places, because you can't control my experience, and you want to be doing things within your artwork which are going to be easy for me to get to work, because I don't want to be frustrated when I'm looking at your artwork. That obviously would be bad for my impression of you would be low if you made me very frustrated or annoyed when trying to grade your artwork. Let's go back to the lecture. Now, we did have this lecture about data art this week, working with data. We looked at loading up tables in P5. This was on Monday. And we looked at loading up JSON files, JavaScript object files. I did have a little hack that I just wanted to talk to you about with this artist in the Museum of Modern Art artwork. I'll just flip to that. We were going through this artwork and loading up a JSON file, artist.json, and I was just getting a bit frustrated because I couldn't access it the way I wanted. And in fact, it was a JSON file in kind of array format, but it showed up in my sketch once I'd loaded it as an object with numeric keys, but not a full array. So for instance, I didn't have the .length property, and I couldn't iterate over it in the way that I want to iterate over an array. So I worked out a trick to get this to turn it into a proper array. We load the file in preload, then I run this file, data equals object.values in parentheses data, which just kind of reprocesses it a little bit and it turns into a proper array. It gains that .length property. So now if I don't have this line, for instance, we will find that a lot of things don't work. I've got this element. Are we able to rewrite data in JSON file in our sketch.js? Yeah, sure. It just shows up as a changeable, mutable object, JavaScript object. I think you can save it if you want. Print data 0, print data.length ends up undefined, and I can't do a for of loop over that data, which is annoying. But if I do have this line in there, then everything works. So my data object turns into a proper array. I've got data.length. That means I've got my 15,000 elements, and I can do this little bit of a calculation. And I was just going about doing a loop to find out what the minimum birth date was in this list of artists and what the maximum death date was. And I can find that the minimum birth date, there's actually one that had 0. That was probably not correct. The minimum was 1181 and the maximum was 2020. So now I can kind of change my positions and actually maybe use the map function. I've forgotten how to use that. I'll just load it up. The map function so that I can position every dot here in the correct place. If you've never used the map function before, it's a very useful feature within P5. It exists in a lot of programming systems, but the idea is you have some input value and you want to change it. It goes over a certain range and you want to take it to a different range. So my input value, is it going to be a year? And I want the range to be within the range of birthdays and end of life days for all of these artists. So I'm going to change that into the width of my canvas. So this is going to be what I want. This is the output. It's going to be between 0 and width, and the input's going to be min birth, max death, and then the input value there is artist.begin date. I'm not sure that this is going to be a very good artwork. I'm just trying to continue what I was doing last week to where I got frustrated where it wasn't working correctly. End date, end of that artist's life. So now I've got my two maps. That should be height. Whoops. And my art is going to look a little bit different now. Oh, now I've got everything is kind of squished up at that end. So I might have to change these a little bit, maybe work out what my two values are, maybe just play around with it a bit to get something which looks better. Now I've got a better range of birthdays and death days. I really want the range to be in something that's slightly more useful, so that I cover the whole screen. That's just my concept for what I want it to look like. This is looking a bit better. It's funny that they seem to be so early, clustered so early in the range. Oh, now I've gone too far down. Anyway, you know what I mean. Oh, maybe the death day should be like 19. I think that's getting too high. That's higher, isn't it? Oh, that's better. Oh, now I've gone back to a line. Anyway, I don't want to work too much on this artwork. I was just messing around with some data from a JSON file. We've got other stuff to talk about today. So where were we within the lecture? I've done the extra admin corner. Do make sure that you've got your sketch organized, you've forked, cloned, and done your sketch for this week's pre-lab task. If you haven't done it, do it even if it's after your lab. The labs end today for this week, so tomorrow I will be chasing up anyone who hasn't done that task and asking them why they are not engaging with their major project. So that's basically a pretty annoying question to get asked, a pretty annoying question for me to have to ask. And I know that probably for the folks watching me live, you've all done this a million times over and have had a great experience doing your sketch and your tasks over the last few weeks, but there may be some people who need to catch up with that, and I'll be making sure that everyone's keeping up to date so that our major projects are, you know, ready to go. Got to have our coffee in admin corner, don't we? Okay, where are we today? API data. This is where data art, I think, starts to get a little bit more interesting, because you can make artworks that change over time even if you're not there to change it. So what do I mean by that? Well, so far we've used data to drive an artwork as a way of connecting some artwork to the real world, finding some data from somewhere, downloading it, integrating it into our artwork, and using it every time. But the hack which we've used over on Monday and today has been to take the data outside of our sketch.js and store it in a separate file. But what I'm going to show you now is how to use P5 to load data directly from somewhere else on the internet. And that is really another step, right? Because once you can load data directly from somewhere else on the internet, if that data elsewhere changes tomorrow, then your artwork will also change tomorrow. So now you're separating your artwork from yourself. It's becoming an independent entity in some way. And we already do this with interaction, because the viewer has to interact with artworks, engage with them to complete the experience. The artwork is not complete until someone has viewed it and interacted with it. But when we do API data as part of our artworks, we're doing a similar thing. The artwork is not complete until it loads this data, until we find out what's happening with it, and then the artwork is complete with the data that's there today. Tomorrow it might be different. So it's quite exciting. And this web API concept, what does that even mean? There's a lot of letters there. Some folks may have heard of this, particularly if you're a computing student. But if you're not a computing student, this might just be noise, right? What is web API? I know what the web is. That sounds like the internet, doesn't it? That does sound like the internet. But API, well, API means Application Programming Interface. Well, that doesn't seem to help, does it? They're just potentially 3 random words to folks who are not a computer science student. Even if you are a computer science student, or even if you're a computer science teacher like myself, you might think, are they really sensible words to be using for anything? Anyway, practically, an API on the web means a special web URL, an address, which instead of producing a web page, produces JSON data. So instead of giving you a web page for a person to view in their web browser, it sends a amount of data in this JSON format, which a program can view. And when we talk about APIs, that defines a way of accessing something on the internet by a program, so that the application can, some software application can interact with another application which exists on the internet using programming, rather than a person going to a website and entering details and getting something out. So these API addresses, special URLs, are some kind of interface to let your application, which is your artwork written in P5, that's actually an application in some sense of that word. It lets your artwork access a web server with data that we want, and it will give, that server will give you the data in a format that makes sense to P5, that is JSON format. I guess I could note that not every web API returns JSON data, but many / most do. It's actually very much the typical way of communicating data on the internet. Why do we do this? I've already explained this, but you don't need to save the data on your computer. This is great. P5 can just grab it from the internet for you. Then it will always be up to date. So your artwork could change from minute to minute, which is cool. We can program the data we get. You actually can adjust what you're getting from this web server with a special format of the URL. I just want to address a question in the chat. The question is, we can load data. How do we save data? I'm actually not talking about how we save data in this lecture. There's probably, you can look in the reference. I might get around to that question at the end, but we're really only talking about reading data from the internet in this lecture, not writing it. Okay, here's an example of an API on the internet. Well, this is a mouthful, isn't it? And before I view it, we'll just have a look at this very long URL. And if you start to look at it just with a critical eye, a few things start to jump out. So the first part, https://www.data.brisbane.queensland.gov.au, that looks like a normal website. And in fact, it is a normal website. Brisbane.queensland.gov.au, well, that kind of looks like the website for the local government of Brisbane, the city in Australia, in Queensland. And data.brisbane.queensland.gov.au, that suggests that it's a website that's particularly to do with data. Then we've got some other stuff after this slash data / API. This is sort of suggesting we're getting some API involved. /3 /action /data store _search !, resource ID, blah, a bunch of stuff, and limit equals 5. So actually, if we break this down, there's what we could call an endpoint, an address that a web browser or another application can try to make a request of, request a page, request some data. That's the endpoint, this part. And then there's a question mark, and then there's some parameters. So the endpoint is data store search. That sort of suggests that we're just searching for some data. Then our parameters after the question mark is resource ID equals this, blah, which relates to a particular data, kind of data within this big data store. And then we've got an AND symbol, just the normal ampersand, meaning another ANDed aspect, just like in our if then else statements. And limit equals 5. So we're trying to get some data where the limit of this data is 5, just the first 5 things against this resource ID. What do we get? We can actually just use our web browser to see what this data is. This is some data, a search that I made earlier. You might be able to see what's here. So if you go to an API address in Firefox, you'll find that Firefox will actually translate it into this handy format. It has a viewer for JSON. All this stuff is built by Firefox. So the data which your browser is actually getting is this, and then Firefox is presenting it in a useful format for you. So the result is here. Success, we successfully got that data. The result includes 5 things, and all of the things are an object. Here's the records under this field. Oh, we've got more, we got fields in each one, links, some other stuff. And each of the records is actually a record of a public swimming pool in Brisbane. So this data source is a list of all the public swimming pools in Brisbane and their opening hours. So we could make a P5 artwork about swimming pools in Brisbane, which I'm probably is not that useful, but I don't know, it could be about accessibility, it could be about disability access, it could be which ones are heated, probably most of them are heated, which ones offer aqua aerobics, which ones have car parking spaces and how many. So yeah, very potentially interesting data. Bell Bowery Pool, that might be good. Carole Park Swim Centre, never been there. Centenary Pool at Spring Hill. Chermside Pool. So many interesting, maybe I want to get more. I'll put limit 15, access some more data. I want to see my 15 records. We've already seen those 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we got some more. Dunlop Park Memorial Swimming Pool. Well, we'll just get all of the data, get rid of that limit. I think we've only got a few. Oh, they put in 100. How many actual records did we get? 22, I think. There's 22 listed in this web API. I guess there's 22 swimming pools in the city of Brisbane. That seems realistic, I suppose. I'm not sure how many swimming pools you normally have in a city. Anyway, so this is just an example of finding some data on the internet. How on earth did I find out this URL? Well, I was searching around for data from governments in Australia, local governments. Here's Brisbane City Council's data website, Open Data. So if you start searching for data websites from governments, many times they make this available publicly. So we could search for data about cycling, bikeway sections. Ooh, this is useful. I don't know if these are all APIs. Sometimes they're just ones you have to download in zipped format. I don't want that. I want data that I can just access with JSON. Ooh, traffic management intersection volume. Oh, it just wants to download that JSON file. Formats. Ooh, API, no. It's different ways of getting this data. I don't want to download it. I just want ones that have an API. Swimming pools. What did it look like in that swimming pools one? Swimming pool locations. Ooh, updates. Anyway, you can browse the Brisbane data sets at your leisure if you wish. So what is the point of this? It's a programmatic way of getting data from a website, getting information out, which is useful for us P5 artistic programmers because we want to use that data in an artwork. Here's how we do it. And so I've found another piece of data here from the local ACT government. Showing you that page. Got our localdata.act.gov.au page, and you can find out some different aspects of how our city works. Much of this is connected to an API. And in fact, I chose a particular one, which was the data which is related to all of the public transport journeys. So I'll just show you this JSON file. Copy. It's a doozy. It's a doozy, but this is like a reverse list of days. Here's today, which doesn't have the data yet, but it's the number of bus services was 2,359 local bus services. Number of light rail journeys was 1,156. Number of rapid services was 2288. etc. So, of course, the numbers are kind of down at the moment, given that Australia is in lockdown, or Canberra is still until the end of this week. You can see several months ago there were way more people on buses, 15,000 people on local trips, and 16,000 people on rapid, the typical intercity buses, and a lot of people on light rail. So there's certainly people still using them, but not as many. Well, why don't we make an artwork about it? Wouldn't that be fun? Here's how we do it. We can, similarly to my previous examples, we'll have a data variable, let data. Then we're going to have just store the URL in a useful variable, so we don't have to have that built-in messing everything up. And then we have to use this HTTP GET function in P5 to access this web server and get this JSON file for us. So the URL goes there. This is the expected format, is JSON. There's a Boolean. I've forgotten what the Boolean means there. And then we've got this other weird thing, function response. So this is kind of weirdness alert. You might not have seen this, but one of the parameters of HTTP GET is actually a small function that's going to define what to do with the data once it's downloaded. So once the data is downloaded, P5 or JavaScript computes this function, puts the data in that response parameter, and then our job is to just set that data equals response. Sometimes people call this a callback function. So you have a function which goes and downloads something. That might take some time. And so when that's done, the callback function triggers, and the callback function's job is usually to put that thing you've just downloaded into your application or take the next step, even if some time has gone past. So when we're downloading stuff off the internet, we don't know how long it's going to take. It might be very quick, it might take ages, it might be a huge file. So we have these callback functions in there to allow our browser to get on with other work while that file's downloading, to allow JavaScript to do other stuff. So that's what we're doing here. You can find data in lots of places. We'll have a play with this data set in a minute. I'll show you a bit of praxis about it, but there's lots of websites to help us find public APIs. So if here in Australia, I'd be looking at data.gov.au, data.act.gov.au. There's quite an interesting project called the Glam Workbench. This is related to, it's a collection of lots of things to do with the kind of cultural sector. GLAM stands for galleries, libraries, and museums. And they link to lots of different APIs, which is really handy. There's a lot of folks here to do with New Zealand, England, and Australia broadly, but you can see some libraries, State Library of New South Wales, etc. Tribune negatives, metadata magic. So there's lots of things you can have a look at here. Government, Australia. Ooh, Prime Minister's transcripts. That sounds fun. Harvest all of the XML transcripts. Actually, I'm not going to do that. That sounds very boring to read what the Prime Minister's been saying lately. The Glam Workbench. What else have we got? The data, ACT government data, I showed you that. Data.gov.au is kind of a meta repository, like it will point you to different websites that also might have APIs. Buses, maybe. HVR, I don't know what that means. HVR controlled access buses. Any format. I really only want things that are going to come in JSON format, so maybe I can choose that. JSON. Ballarat bus shelters comes in JSON format. We can make an artwork about all of the bus shelter locations in the city of Ballarat in Victoria. Well, there you go. So we could just hit that in that JSON file. There it is. We could hit this this file in our artwork, download this list of bus shelters, and make an artwork about it. Okay, let's go back to the public transport data set in Canberra. So here's some data about how many passengers travel on different services each day. can do some, I've got a few examples here. Here's just the main, the raw data. It has this kind of name here, so we can access with this API. There's the API endpoint, same name.json. There's ways of just getting one day if you want. I put a little query in there, so $date equals 2020.10.5. And we'll just see 2021.10, there's the 1st of October. So not a lot of people on the local buses, 2,000 people. What about the 1st of April? There were loads of people, 15,000. That's typically the number we get per day. So we could have those queries if we want, but I think in our artwork we just want to get the whole thing. I had one prepared for you, but I'm actually just going to make a new one because that sounds fun. Who knows where we'll get to. All right, function preload. Preload. I'm going to put my data variable out there, so I get to get it later. Now, why don't we just have a look at what we get? Print data. We'll see how far we get. Print data, not print let data. Print data. And this is going to be called ACT Transport Artwork 2. I've got a history of making data artworks about ACT bus trips, actually, which is a bit of a weird thing to have a history doing. But years ago, there was a bus shelter, a very interesting, if you're interested in these things, an interesting bus station at Belconnen, the old Belconnen bus interchange. And it was interesting because it had this kind of 70s aesthetic. When Belconnen Town Centre was first laid out. And unfortunately, like time goes on, it wasn't working anymore. They were changing the way that the town centre was going to function, and they changed the place that they were going to have the bus interchange. So they decided to shut that down and demolish the old interchange, which meant that the old attractive, interesting bus shelters had to go, but that's life. But before they did that, there was a little arts festival called Into Change, where there were many other events, but I made this artwork, a sound artwork about the bus shelters, which was a weird thing to do, but there you go. So we've got all of these objects here, 835 objects, and there they all are. Each one has a few parameters. We've got the date. We've got the number of people on local services. That's 0 for the first day because that's today. We don't have the data yet. For yesterday, or actually it's a few days out, isn't it? The 12th. Well, that was Tuesday, so it's really behind. But going from the 11th, we've definitely got an amount of data. That's Monday. Number of local bus services, number of school services, light rail, peak services, rapid route services, and other. I don't know what other means. But let's choose one of them and maybe just print out I'm going to do a for of loop and see if it works. For let day of data. So one day for each element of those is a day. I'm just going to make that little variable called day to store it. Print day dot rapid route. Is this going to work? We'll find out. There we go. We get all of those rapid routes. So this is going to help me make my artwork actually. I'm going to do this in my draw area. Maybe we're going to go day, let's index, put that at the top here actually. Let index equal 0. I'll actually change it to something else. Let index equal data.length. So I'm going to go from the back and draw this data out somehow. So the draw function will give it a background, maybe background 15. It's kind of deep gray, and I'm going to draw a big rectangle that's kind of like a height of this data going by. So let day equal data index. The rect is going to go from, actually I'll change my, set up my canvas here, window width. No stroke. We will start at the left-hand side. We will go all the way across. Then we will start at height. Well, we've got to find our pixel for the amount of data there. I don't know how much, what's the maximum is here. Something like, this is the problem with data, right? You never know what you're getting. I guess the maximum is about 25,000, 26,000. We could go through the data and find the max. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to guess that it's 26,000. Let rides equal day dot rapid route. And then we'll go from height minus, I want to go from the top. Oh, that's the width and the height. Whoops. This is the, sorry, I'm getting a bit confused about how rectangles work. So that's my left starting point, my width starting point. Now my Y starting point should be height minus rides, height times rides divided by 26,000. We'll guess that that's something that I want it to be. And the width is going to be the whole width, and the height of my rectangle is going to be that number. Well, I got some kind of error. I'm not sure what happened there. Day is undefined. Oh, and then I wanted to subtract one from index minus one for each frame. So it's going to move around over my frames. And if index equals 0, then I'll set index to be data.length. Hasn't worked yet. I might stop my big printing thing happening there. Oh, that's assignment. Whoops. Should be testing. Oh, I'm getting something. Something crazy. Maybe not the artwork I wanted. Maybe I'll change that background to fade out a little bit. Give it a bit of a fade out. Anyway, you know, if I played with this, I could probably get something attractive. That sort of over time suggests like more rapid bus services, perhaps. Whoa, and then day is undefined. I don't want day to be undefined. Why would day be undefined? If day equals undefined, then it's going to return. Get out early. I don't really want that actually. I want not equal undefined. There we go. So I'll only do my drawing if day is not equal to undefined. And if it is, we're not going to try to do anything. So this should be looping over and over again through time. Prints, restarters, over the 800 days of data we have. Restarts eventually, I hope. Still got a day is undefined. I don't want it to, it should never get that. It should always continue. Anyway, I'll fix it later. Someone can tell me what to do in the chat. Where are we? Thanks for watching my little practice go. Of course, I think I could make a much better artwork here, but I just wanted to show you some way of hitting that data set. In fact, I made one last year, and you know the cool thing is it still works. Here's my one from last year. Open. This was related to, or I'll get it from my notes. This was related to the, oh, there should be a let, I think, related to the tram, our light rail system in Canberra. And, you know, this artwork continues to work, and now it has a year more data to look at. So this is the number of tram rides represented as a little ellipse. Probably I did it better last year, I'm not sure, I can't remember what I was doing. Slightly different concept there. But it's always fun to play with these things, and they evolve over time, which is cool. But let's see how the professionals are doing it. I've got a few examples of data art to talk about. And of course, the first example came from this tree viz concept. And I guess there's two sorts of data art. There's one sort which you often find on social media, on Reddit, where there's someone is just producing data in an artful way, but it's not exactly meant to be an artwork. And this is an example of that. It's certainly appealing and attractive and interesting, but it's meant for storing regular old data. It's not meant to be an artwork in itself, and it kind of lacks a little bit of the je ne sais quoi, I think, because it's utilitarian. So there's obviously beautiful data visualizations which are used on television, in magazines, or in articles where someone has tried to put data into a very... I've got that link. Someone just said data is beautiful in Reddit. There's a link in the further reading. /r/data is beautiful. A lot of very utilitarian data representations, which are pretty. Many of them are really interesting, but not exactly artworks, I would say. You know, feel free to argue with me in the chat. I may or may not engage with it. But here's something, this is a bit different. This is an artwork by a Canberra artist called Anna-Madeline Raupach, called Controlled Burn. It's related to climate, to maximum temperatures that are in each year. And it's a comment on really the effect of climate change in Australia. And it relates the effects of climate change to bushfires. And the fire part is represented very viscerally and realistically through this by actually using fire to represent the data. So the artist here has very carefully burned matches to be the correct point in the maximum temperature over a month, and represented years going by in this form of data. So you can see a link to more of Anna-Madeline Raupach's work there. A really interesting artist commenting on climate. So this one, you wouldn't put it in a magazine, right? But it fits on the wall in a gallery, and it's really got that whimsical je ne sais quoi element that really hits you in the feels, doesn't it? The fact that it's using the matches there. But this is a kind of, I should say real, like a sculptural artwork existing in with physical objects, but I've got a few examples that are purely existing in a computer. This one's called Packet Garden. It's quite an older artwork now, from 2006 by, I've forgotten the person's name, Julian Oliver. And the idea with this artwork is you would run it on your computer and it would track your use of the internet and create a representation of your internet use in this 3D world. So whenever you download something, it makes a little valley, and if you upload some data, it makes a little hill. And if you do some particular kind of action on the internet, visit particular types of websites or do particular kinds of connections, it grows a little plant to represent that connection, which is really cool. So individuals would use these gardens, this system. It would accumulate their internet data and create a garden representing your use of the internet. Cool idea. Here's another physical one. This is by an artist called Nathalie Miebach, but you can see this artist's work. She has a TED Talk, which is pretty cool. The idea is to represent climate through a sculpture. So it's a series called Sandy Rides, to do with Hurricane Sandy that occurred in the States, and what that meant for the world, but making the comment that this is like a kind of amusement park event. So translating art quite whimsically or abstractly into these sculptures, translating data whimsically. You can see more of Natalie's work there. She also works with music, using music to represent these things. Another example, this is a quite a cool artwork, and in fact it's one that's created in P5, so worth having a look, by Sharon Brand. I think Sharon is from New Zealand, and this artwork is sort of related to, it's a generative, interactive data artwork using data related to COVID-19, representing COVID-19 caseloads during 2020, so quite early in the pandemic, but it should still work now, through music and through vision. And it related that to lockdown experiences that people started to have in 2020, particularly in New Zealand. They had a whole country lockdown. We're still experiencing these things now, which seems like the nightmare is not over, but Sharon Brand was using the camera to take images of the viewer here and then manipulate that using data and generative techniques in P5. So very relevant to Comp 1720, really, as a way of doing art. And a good use of the camera. I won't show you here now because I'm already using my camera to stream to you, but I encourage you to click that link and wear headphones. It's very interesting artwork. A few links. Some of this stuff is represented in the textbook, chapter 12, Getting Started with P5.js. Of course, there was the data art category on Reddit, a data art category on flowing data. This stuff is a little bit more whimsical than the ones on Reddit, I think. Tapestry, sheep herding, lots of cool examples. Bird songs, sonographs, color analysis. Boy, there's a lot of data art about COVID-19. Obviously, people are obsessed with cases, unfortunately deaths, vaccinations, hopefully, amount of time in lockdown, all these kind of things. Really, really interesting stuff here. And a few articles, 6 artists who've swept data art into the digital age, and a whole playlist of TED Talks with people using data in their artworks. I think this is, when people get into this, it's something which is quite interesting to the scientific community, because artists tend to look at data in a different way and represent it differently. So it can speak to scientific and technology communities in ways that we don't normally see. And that's all I got time for today. What was the question was from, well, there's one YouTube link here from Ali. Just going to see what this is.
If you manage a
No, I don't want to
team,
watch that. Oh, that's these folks who play barcodes as musical instruments. I certainly recommend you check that link out. Really amazing musical use of everyday data. what was I going to show you? Oh yeah, I wanted to just think about writing. Get rid of all these. Goodbye. We got load JSON. We've also got save JSON. So I didn't go through that, but let's just have a little look now. If you wanted to save a JSON object, I guess, does that download it? Yeah. So this is going to the save JSON function is going to get your browser to try to download a file. It's not going to store it in any permanent place on the internet. You know, I think that there are definitely ways to get websites to kind of store data within a user's browser on your user system. That's really way beyond what we do in this course. It's specific use of current web technologies, which is a bit much. So I'm not going to be able to go into any more detail about that. Of course, if you want to just download a file quickly, you can use this save JSON function within P5, but I'm not going to go beyond what P5 gives us. Just looking through the reference, is there any other save stuff? Save canvas, save frames, save, create writer, save strings, save table. Ooh, save a lot of things. Saves a given element to the client's computer. Yeah, so it's all downloading things. What you definitely don't want to do is put any saves within drawer, as it will open a new save dialog on every render. I guess this is not something I would do in your major project, because looking at the major project spec, the assumption is that this is running on a computer in a gallery. So you don't want the browser to break out of that experience. You don't want your browser to be downloading files, going to other locations on the internet. That won't work in a gallery. This has to sit on the wall and just work for 3 hours while people walk around. So save dialogues, trying to download data onto the user's system is not an effective thing to work within the spec of the major project. So just be a bit careful about that. Not seeing any other questions except for that nice video from Ali. Definitely folks should watch that. But apart from that, hope to see some more posts from the folks doing their labs today, and I will see you folks on Monday for our second sort of interesting P5 topic on kind of A-life, generative life artworks and dynamic artworks. So I will catch you then. See you folks.